right now. There we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I think we'll wait just a couple more minutes until we hit 6, and then maybe a little past the hour before we launch into it. But if we want to do introductions and chat beforehand, please. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're just at 6 o'clock now, so we'll keep letting people in, but in the interest of time, Lisa, Aurora, do you want to pull up the presentation? We could also do rounds of introductions if we wanted to.
Are you all seeing the screen of my mouse, right? The full screen?
Before we share a screen, I'd like to go back to where we can see everybody and maybe just get a raise of hands, either visually on your video like this or using the reactions to just, I'd be curious how many people are from Santa Fe, Bushwater, Longfellow neighborhoods that are on here so far tonight. 2, 3. There's got to be more. And who's lived in this neighborhood for more than 5 years? All right.
Jemai's raising her hand. I can feel it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has anyone lived longer than 10 years? Hands are staying up. Okay, cool. How about 20? If we had some of the people from the Church of the Good Shepherd, I could ask about 40 maybe, huh? Or maybe even longer. Did you guys hear from anybody from the church on RSVPs?
I think Reverend Eason might be going us. I shared the invite with him to send to his congregation and saw he registered, but I'm not sure if he's going to make it or not.
Okay. Well, we should probably get started because it is evening and I know people are going to want to go eat dinner at some point. So, or if you want to share your screen again, get going on the introductions.
Great. Well, I'm going to leap in. I'm Liz Epstein. I work with UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital, Oakland on a variety of topics that engage neighbors. And I will, in a few minutes, share some background on the project, but I would like to also have other team members introduce themselves and UCSF folks to start with. Paul Takayama.
Sure. Thanks, Liz. Paul Takayama, Assistant Vice Chancellor, Community Government Relations, UCSF Benioff Children's Hospitals. Abby, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Abby Ellis. I'm Associate Director of Community Relations with UCSF. And I get to introduce Jessica, who was our newest staff member.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Arline. I'm the Associate Director of Community and Government Relations, largely responsible for the East Bay and Children's Hospital. I'm new, so be easy on me. It's nice to meet you all.
Lovely. Lisa and Aurora, could you introduce yourselves?
Sure, I think there's a couple of other UC folks, so do you
Oh,
want to?
we do actually, since I can't see my whole screen.
Yeah,
I know that we have.
Susan Toland and.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Susan Toland, I'm the Director of Communications for Benioff Children's Hospitals, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful.
I think I also saw Lorna.
Hi there, I'm Lorna Fernandez. I'm with the UCSF Public Affairs team. I do media relations for Benioff Children's Hospital, and I'm based in Oakland.
Wonderful.
Great. Thank you. And I'll just actually next I'm going to ask Councilmember Cow to please introduce himself. And I think when we shift to the Bay Tree presentation, maybe that'll be the moment for Lisa and Aurora to introduce themselves. So Councilmember Cow, thank you again for being with us and being a champion of this project. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the work that the Children's Hospital UCSF team has done over the number of years. And I equally appreciate the input of the community, both the neighborhood associations nearby, Santa Fe CAM, Longfellow Community Association, and just all the neighbors and other residents nearby who live in the neighborhoods, Bushrod, Santa Fe, Longfellow, Golden Gate, and probably others. So I want to appreciate all that work. And we're near the final innings here, I believe. And I just want to say I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of final design you all come up with as a group. And our challenge, of course, will be taking that, hoping that design is not too intricate and too complicated, or I should say too expensive, and that it's something that we could actually implement over the next few years. That's going to be a challenge, but that's our goal, and I'm going to work to make sure that happens at some point. So I don't have anything more to say at this point. I'll be on for about a half hour. One of my staff, Deirdre, who many of you know, will be on for the rest of the meeting. And let's see, Abby, am I introducing OakDOT, or what's the next step?
I think Liz might be the next step if we're going to go in the slide order. Liz, do you want to cover the UCSF background?
Yes, please. If you could advance the slide, that would be great.
Thank you, council member.
So I know many of you know this, but just to make sure that those who may not have participated up to this point have all the same information, I'll just briefly refer to what's been done to date. And in 2015, as part of the hospital's master plan process for modernization of its campus, the city of Oakland asked the hospital to initiate a community design process to refresh Helen MacGregor Plaza. And at that time, there were a number of means by which a group that came together from the hospital and the neighborhoods and the city reached out into the neighbor communities and sought input to the design process and tried to garner information on what kinds of uses and what kinds of space people would like to see in the plaza going forward. From that, two conceptual designs were developed, and those were shared at a community meeting in June of last year. And there was a lot of input that was gained from that. We asked people to indicate via survey what their preferred design direction was. And when we had that information in hand, we went to the next step, which we're really now right in the middle of, or maybe we're rounding the bend at third base, as Councilmember Kalb might be suggesting. And we have had the assistance of Bay Tree Design in taking the conceptual designs and the extensive input from neighbors and creating what we are hoping will be a consensus design that we are all then excited to try to move forward and get to implementation. So that's the background, and what we are going to do before we go into the design workups. Thank you for for reminding me. So this shows sort of where we are in the timeline. The first phase, what I was describing in 2015, included the online survey, visioning sessions, and then the second phase, which began in July, was again looking at the design options that were built in the 2015 process, and now moving forward with a further design process. So you can see we're right in the thick of it, and we will soon be hearing from Bay Tree on where we are with the design to date. So what I would like to do, as this is something that I think will be of interest to everyone who's attending tonight, and it's of interest with regard to the design of the plaza, is to invite Colin Peath from the City of Oakland Department of Transportation to share with everyone the Martin Luther Jr. King Way paving project, which is in its early stages, and to hear what is planned there and how to provide important input to that project that's both related to the work at Helen MacGregor Plaza that we have underway and to the broader corridor. Colin.
Great, thanks Liz, and thanks everyone at Bay Tree for having us tonight. Looking forward to learning more and hearing more design ideas for the plaza. So like Liz said, this presentation is mostly to give everyone some context for what will be happening to the street in the coming years as we repave and as y'all redesign and build the new plaza at Helen MacGregor. So this project is a repaving project, and from 47th Street to 61st, or the Berkeley border. And through Measure KK, in the city, we have additional funds to do safety improvements that normal paving projects otherwise wouldn't have. So we can make pedestrian crossing improvements, bicycle and transit improvements. So we have this spring and summer to conduct outreach and gather. We're wrapping up this first phase of gathering like high-level priorities, and then soon we'll be coming back to the community with some design ideas. So our goals for the project are to slow vehicle speeds, curb unsafe driving, reduce vehicle collisions, as this street is on our high injury network, where it's like 63% of all collisions happening on only 6% of our streets. We want to improve pedestrian safety at major intersections, particularly at 52nd, where we're seeing higher concentrations of collisions, to improve safety for people walking and biking. And a big question now is whether or not to implement a bike plan recommendation to install protected bike lanes on the street. Next slide, please. So here's some existing condition photos. I'm sure many of you are intimately familiar with how unsafe and intense the street can be at times. It's a very wide configuration, so it's conducive to fast speeds, and it's basically built for vehicles and not so much for people who aren't in a vehicle. So in the on and off ramp areas, we have some design challenges for trying to get people walking or biking through these areas. And next slide, please. So some of the rationale for doing improvements are because we're seeing higher numbers of collisions on the street. In the diagram to the right, you'll see that the majority of collisions are happening, unfortunately, at 52nd Street, right near the hospital. So we've heard from you all, residents, and from our survey that we did, we got almost 500 responses of people telling us that this is a priority intersection where we need to improve conditions for pedestrians. And as we've seen in previous discussions with the hospital, this is of particular importance, and there's been some design ideas on how to make this crossing at 52nd Street safer. We did have a fatality on the street in 2015, and there's been 65 collisions in total in the past 5 years. And although pedestrians make up a much smaller share of overall traffic than vehicles, they represent 10% of collisions, and the majority of collisions are comprised of vehicles. So like many of you have probably seen, the top cause of collisions are people disobeying traffic signals. On site visits, we frequently see people speeding through the street, and running red lights is not uncommon. So we're hoping to mitigate some of these conditions with our project and improve safety, and try to coordinate to give people a safer experience to access the rest of the street as well as the plaza. Next slide, please. So here's a section view of what the street currently looks like today at the northern leg of the 55th Street intersection. So just to show you that we have a decent amount of room to use to try to make the street safer. So we want to reduce that kind of wide open feeling that you get from being on the street in a car that lends itself to, excuse me, to operating like a freeway. And we can try to get creative to see what we can do with that space. And a protected bike lane potentially would be where the parking lane is now, and then it would push the parking lane out to where the current drive lane is. So that could help shorten crossing distances and give a little bit of a buffer for pedestrians, as well as providing bicycle access. So we have a number of options for including road diets as reducing lanes to what we can do for the street. So, and as well, just noting that the elevated BART tracks creates the perception of like just a large physical barrier to the neighborhood. So we want this project to help reconnect the pedestrian street grid so that there's more of a sense of connection between the neighborhood around the street. And next slide, please. So just as I was mentioning earlier, this is mostly just for context and to let you all know what's happening with the street so we can better coordinate going forward. I'll stay on for your presentation so we can answer any questions you might have regarding like design details. Things are still up in the air right now regarding like specifics of the design. So, but we're happy to answer any questions we can. And then next steps for us are to do phase 2 of our outreach, where we ask folks to weigh in on design concepts, potentially a protected bike lane concept and a road diet concept, and to make sure we've connected with all the major stakeholders in the area. And sometime this summer, we should be deciding on a final design for the street. And then in about 2 years, the actual paving project will happen, where we'll build some iteration of this project. So construction is a little ways off, but we'll be engaging you all in the meantime. So that's all I have today, and looking forward to the discussion.
Great, Colin, thank you. Could you put your contact information and perhaps even the link to the survey in the chat so that people who are on the meeting can take note of that. And I'd encourage people to go to the survey. It's a great opportunity to share your particular concerns and ideas. Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. Is it Lisa or Aurora? Are you going to take
I'm going
it?
to start.
Okay, great. Thank you. And will you introduce yourselves?
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is Lisa Howard. I'm a principal at Bay Tree Design, and I've been working on this project with Aurora and Willa, who's here to help. Aurora, you want to introduce yourself as the main person on this?
Yeah, sure. My name is Aurora. I am an associate at Bay Tree Design, and I've had the pleasure to work on this project with Lisa and Willa.
Willa, you want to introduce yourself as a facilitator? And
Sure. Yeah. My name is Willa Coey, and I'm an associate at Bay Tree Design as well, and I'll be helping with the breakout sessions today.
so we were super excited to be asked to work on this project. I think it's an amazing piece of land that could have so much more community aspects to it. And I want to just introduce you a little bit to where we started on this, and then I'm going to hand it over to Aurora to explain and walk you through the new design. But really wanted to back up and talk a little bit about what Councilmember Calb and Liz and Colin are talking about, because they all brought up big important pieces. Consensus, like we want this plan to be something that the community has consensus on. So it doesn't mean everybody's going to want everything that you see in it, but most everybody will agree that this is like the sweet spot of what you want to see in this space. So we'll work with that idea, and we're going to walk you through this stuff tonight. We'll do some breakout rooms, and then following this meeting, we'll come back with all of your input with the final design. With that, we want to design something that we know can be implemented. And so we've been really thinking about how we can do that, and you'll see that as we walk through the design as well. The sort of backing up and going to what Liz was talking about earlier, we took all the information we were given from the 2015 process, and then the recent work that UCSF did, and really looked at like, what were we hearing people saying? And there were really three key threads. The first one, which goes back to what Colin was saying, is, safety and auto dominance. So like pedestrian safety, how can we make this safer? How can we make it be a place where people can feel like they can cross the street? And it's not so much about just all these cars whizzing by. The second piece that we heard a lot about was really wanting to acknowledge the history. There's so much history in this area. And also just making this a community space, like identity wise. Right now, when you drive down MLK, it's people are whizzing, they're trying to get to the highway, and that plaza doesn't really have any sense of like the wonderfulness of the neighborhood if you just step a couple steps in off of MLK in either direction. And then making the place feel safe and comfortable so that pedestrians will want to be hanging out in the space, people want to go into it. So this is what we heard we gathered as we went through the analysis of the process. And that's kind of how we've approached the project all along. Aurora, next. So looking at that analysis and then going to the site, Aurora and I went to the site for a day, and we sat there for quite a while, and we walked around and looked at it from different angles and walked into the neighborhoods and came back out. And started asking questions. Well, what if the bus stop was moved to the north? How can we figure out some community identity at an auto scale so that when you're driving down MLK, you're like, oh, wow, this is a neighborhood space and it's really nice. How can we do some things with the tree canopies? So these were questions that we asked, and we presented these in the first meeting. And this is sort of part of what we talked about in the first meeting. And then if you go to the next one, we looked at how we could take those questions, and here's the plan that we came up with that we're going to walk through. And we took those questions and we said, okay, well, what are the opportunities that we have? Well, we want to use the existing concrete walls. So how can we integrate those into the design? We want to make sure that we're working with all the utilities, so we're not moving utilities around and we're not spending money on that area. So really what we were coming up with is, how do we design so that a contractor can build the main pieces, the framework, but that the community can come in and do community pieces as well, so that they have some sense of ownership. It stretches sort of the budget, gives you some sweat equity. And then over time, could other pieces be added by local artists to just really make it a personal space? So those were sort of the approaches we had for the opportunities. And then the objectives go back to what I was talking about when we analyzed the community input, which was we really want to design for pedestrians. We want to design and make the space within the plaza about comfort and safety so that you want to be in it and stay in it. And we really want to design so that it does have some community identity. Next. So this is an image at the corner of 52nd and MLK looking into the plaza that goes along with the design, and Aurora will walk you guys through this in a minute. And then next. And then this is it within the plaza looking back out towards UCSF and the BART tracks. Next. So really thinking about like, you know, the pedestrian safety, Colin covered so much of it. And I was like, I've always thought of MLK as being very wide, but I was like, wow, 123 feet and there's only 7 feet on each end for pedestrians. I mean, it really does give you that sense of like, you're not really in a space, you're not in a pedestrian space when you're in this plaza. And when I was there with Aurora, she's like, this is an island and how can we make it a peninsula? It's surrounded by all these streets. So we've been looking at that, and that's sort of the image on the left shows a little bit of that. And the image on the right is an image showing the 3 neighborhoods coming together. The circle that's dashed is the 1/4 mile walking radius to Helen MacGregor, which is a little green triangle in the middle. That's a standard measurement for somebody wanting to go to a park. That's about the distance somebody will walk to get to a park. So, you know, how can we get everybody within that 1/4 mile radius safely over to this park if they wanted to go and hang out in this community space? Next. So from the first meeting and thinking about things in line of for pedestrians, you know, these are the questions that we've been asking. You know, can we have some bulb outs, which goes back to Colin's idea of the road diet. You know, where's the community identity at an auto scale? Is there something we can do along the edge of MLK that when I'm driving in a car, I see it, I identify with it, identify that space, but at the same time, maybe that's some sort of barrier so that you feel like you have this separation between you and the automobiles when you're in the space. You know, could we do anything to turn West Street into a slow street? So just all these kinds of questions came up. And then next. And so what we've come up with in terms of how do we make this a space that would be safer for pedestrians is if we were to relocate the bus stop further up, and you can see it, I'll draw a little bit on here. It's right, oh, that's white, sorry, I was using white earlier today. In this area up here, what it does is that if you stand on that plaza, you feel all the traffic coming at you from going southbound on MLK. And by putting something up at the top, it starts to give a psychological buffer that there's something up there, plus there's the planting island above that. And then it starts to make this bigger, wider space below it, a space that really feels like it's further away from the cars. So with that also, it encourages people to walk through the plaza than just along the sidewalk right now to get to the bus stop. So you start to get some pedestrian activity. The bulb outs we're proposing 2 on 52nd, which we're hoping can be integrated into the 52nd Street improvements. And then this one large one on MLK. And then we've got the existing crosswalks in blue, future crosswalks that are part of West Street in a darker blue. And then the final dark blue is what can we do in addition to that that can be integrated into the MLK piece. And that is the idea of these pedestrian refuge crossings. Because the crosswalks are so wide here, we looked at the diagonal crosswalks, or what is called the scramble or barn dance. And it seems like we could think about that, but we would really be slowing down the auto traffic, and it would be a very long wait on the light because it's such a big intersection, 123 feet. So this is the proposed ideas to address sort of making this more of a space safer for pedestrians. Next. So here's some of that imagery of that. On the left is our diagram of where we would propose, you know, safety crosswalks to this area. This is a image of a pedestrian safety island, or what's called a pedestrian refuge, and then a bulb out for people who might not know these terms, just so that you can understand these as we're going through the images in the presentation. Next. And then this is, I think I turn it over to Aurora. We went straight from pedestrian stuff, now we're going into this, Aurora, and I'm going to give it to you.
Sure, thank you, Lisa. So to stay within the pedestrian safety, we were thinking about this ODOT program, which is called Paint the Town, which involves community members to paint street pavement. And that's a way, I would say, to kind of on both scales, pedestrian and vehicular scales, it kind of starts kind of warning people that this is a pedestrian area. It ties both to the identity of the plaza, but also if you're driving along MLK or 52nd Street, if you start seeing some paving that's painted, then it kind of tells you maybe slow down, there's a pedestrian area, stuff is happening. So that can be definitely some sort of subtle traffic calming solution. So going to the second priority, which, as Lisa mentioned, is kind of comfort and safety more from a pedestrian point of view. This is the open question slide that we also presented from the previous meeting. So providing different uses that would attract visitors is kind of the goal here. And as well as kind of providing different ways to make the space comfortable, which can include creating some visual complexity, maybe different levels, creating desirable design aspects, which we will cover in the next slides, providing better lighting, etc. So first, we are thinking about creating multiple subspaces within the main space. So moving from north to south here on this plan on the left, we have first the public transit area with the relocated bus shelter. And then we have some multiple social seating areas with different types of seating. We also have I hope you guys see my mouse here. We have some raised platforms, or one raised platform, which would serve as a multi-purpose element, which can be either like a small stage for music performance, a yoga area, another place to sit, really whatever people want to use that space for. It's kind of this hybrid, people kind of use the space as they want. And then in front of that platform, we have a central open space, which here we call the public hearing, which I would imagine is kind of like this modern, very small scaled forum from the antique Greece. And then away from the main streets, away from the main traffic, we have the nature play area. And then below that, we have a communal table, which I will describe in the next slide. We added some back racks. We also have kind of the main entrance of the plaza, which here we call the lobby, which would be this open area to really welcome people in from that corner and maybe add some individual seatings. And then we have food trucks. That's something that came up throughout the last meeting, food trucks and coffee carts. So in terms of seatings, we were thinking about offering a variety of sitting areas, but also different types of furnishing. So different zones, different types of furnishing. So we would be reusing a good portion of the existing concrete benches, maybe possibly adding some type of wooden padding onto them just to make them more comfortable, also making them look more modern. Installing also some individual seats. So here, before I jump onto the individual seating, to the middle, in the middle picture here, we have some concrete benches, concrete and wood benches, which are actually from Sport Plaza at UC Berkeley. So this used to be this kind of cold concrete blocks, and recently a firm kind of turned them into benches with woods, which really makes them more usable, more comfortable. So that's kind of like the idea overall of what we could be doing, an example of what we could be doing to the existing benches. And so, yes, so individual seating too, on this little perspective here, I have some urban furnishing that I found from a company we often work with. And then additionally, the communal table, so which the way we are thinking about this piece would be maybe smaller tables that we can just, buy from manufacturers. and then somehow link them with maybe a movable piece, something that would be this hybrid that can really accommodate different uses. For the lighting, there are really two ways we can work on improving the lighting situation right now. So one would be thinning out the canopy, the tree canopy. And for those of you that were around in the 90s, Lisa told me that downtown Berkeley used to have a lot of very dense tree shade, which really made people feel pretty uncomfortable about it. It just kind of looked like a safety issue. So a lot of people avoided the area. But then as soon as the city of Berkeley cut some trees and opened up the canopy, the space becoming much brighter made it also feel much safer. So that's kind of the idea here. We did notice when we were on site that the trees are providing a lot of dense shade, and not so many people are really hanging out in the space. So in order to offer a better solar exposure, we would be selecting some of the existing trees, which we see here to the right in the darker shade of green. And so we would be integrating them into the design, also keeping them as a buffer from the vehicles from MLK. So both for the noise, there's also this aspect of safety, this impression of safety. And then we would be adding new deciduous trees to create seasonal and dapple shade. That would really help making the place feel more comfortable, safer, and it would start creating also this sense of place in a more kind of like emotional way. And then the other way to have more lighting is really light fixtures. So right now there are some street lightings around the plaza, but really not much within the space. So we are working with a lighting designer at the moment, and we are trying to integrate inexpensive and effective lighting in the space. And then we have the play area. So Helen MacGregor Plaza is a pretty small space. However, that does not mean that we can't have any play element in the space. And so luckily, Bay Tree Design has a lot of experience with children's spaces, and we work a lot with play affordances, which means that we can really design for imaginative and creative play without necessarily installing heavy and expensive play structures. So as you see on these pictures, we have a wooden boardwalk, we have boulders, we have this educational and play element, which we created at a school for Berkeley United School District. And then we have plants. So instead of having this really heavy, once again, like kind of play structure that may take a lot of space, we can really be more subtle and start adding different materials, different elements, which children can play with. So, it can be a hopscotch, just integrating into the paving. It can be a wooden boardwalk that kind of feels like this tiny little pirate ship. It can be some boulders to jump from, and then some plant material that, children start, maybe picking up a few flowers from, and really being more imaginative. And then another thing that I did not include to this slide is intergenerational play. We've been thinking if we do have smaller picnic tables, some of these could have some permanent chessboards on them, which this way, everybody gets to play in the space. And so third, we have the community piece. The question here is really, how do we tighten the cultural fabric in the neighborhood? How do we make the neighborhood feel more connected, more proud of its identity? So in the previous surveys and the previous meeting, a lot of neighbors actually mentioned that they would love some kind of historical acknowledgement in the plaza. So what we did is first we did a little bit of historical research, and we also had a lot of great insights from the neighbors in the previous meeting. So kind of to review the major historical layers that came up from this. Obviously, we have the local Ohlone tribes, which is a big part of the local history. And then we have this European, mostly Italian district that was here in the 30s, 40s. A lot of people I heard call the district kind of like the East Bay Little Italy district. And then we also have a portion of the redlining map from the 1930s to the 1950s, 60s, which really it happened to run again along Grove Street, which is today MLK Junior Way. And then lastly, obviously, we have the Black Panther Party, but we also have the East Bay Negro Historical Society. And the picture of the couple at the bottom right is Ruth and Eugene Lazarturme, who were co-founders of the society, and they also co-founded the Church of the Good Shepherd across the street. And so from that, the question is, how do we represent history and identity in this space? On the right, we have some local identity markers. So we have, Rosie the Rifter Memorial in Richmond, which is kind of this vertical and kind of sculptural piece. We have the poems integrated into the paving at the Addison Art District in Berkeley. And then we also have this map that's embedded in the paving as well at the Aquatic Park in Berkeley. So those are not literal ideas. They're really just examples of how different parts of the community were visually integrated into public space. And so to the left of this line, we kind of gathered some names, some elements that we could definitely work with. And again, that doesn't stop there, anything can be added to the conversation. So again, it's really about opening the conversation with you all about, what do we want to talk about? If we have historical pieces and cultural pieces, what is it that we want to be telling? It's a little bit like a storytelling piece. So as far as the design of the plaza, the proposed design, what we did again for the community and for this cultural piece is first we looked at the patterns. Obviously, we have a triangular plaza, which kind of corresponds to the street grid. And then from that, we started kind of drawing this pattern. So we thought it would be fun to also look at the traditional patterns, right? So we have the Oloni baskets, African kind of patterns, and then maybe some European, like the Roman patterns. So a lot of triangles. So it was kind of funny to think, well, what if we played with that, with that triangular thing that keeps coming back and design from that. And then another piece we thought about was, what about planting? Maybe we can play around with the idea of cultural planting. So here the goal is kind of to find another way to integrate the community through a thoughtful selection of drought-tolerant plant species, which we kind of all, I guess, get, how would I say that? Something that we connect with, right? Like many of us have a very strong emotional connection to familiar plants. We may find a sense of identity through the natural environment around us. And so we understand that the plants can really play an important role into feeling rooted to the space. Also, just putting that out there. So right now I just selected a few pictures of plants. So, I put this African native plants samples, and then California native, and then European for kind of like this little Italy thing. Obviously, this aims at being inclusive. So that's one of the pieces that we would want to have a conversation with the community about, like, what is it, what parts of the world do we want to really represent? And we really want to make sure everyone feels included in our design. And so lastly, as Lisa mentioned, what about kind of community involvement, right? Like the goal of this proposed design is really to help create within the community around the plaza. So we've been putting a lot of thought into integrating elements that can be put in place by or with the community to create really a sense of pride, a sense of stewardship. So this could be done through creating a space that would maybe allow for block parties. We had that conversation with the church members when we talked about it with them. They said, well, we used to have block parties and we would love to have more and really use the space, the new plaza, to do so. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Paint the Town program from Oakland Department of Transportation. So this way, you know, community members can be more involved. We can also be more involved in the planting. You know, what if the community was having this kind of like planting day together? So really, this goal that we have here is really to kind of, again, tighten the fabric of the community. As I said earlier, it's really like work together as a community. All right, back to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Aurora. So we're just starting with this proposed design to start to look at, well, you know, how do you pull this apart and what are the different funding sources, potential funding sources? So, you know, we're thinking about the bulb outs, the pedestrian refuge, the bus, relocating the bus stop. Those all seem like they fall into the category of street improvements or potential street improvements. The food truck parking would also fall into that category because in our mind, Colin showed MLK, which is 123 feet wide, but I'd be curious how wide 52nd Street is because it feels incredibly wide and too wide for the amount of traffic that it's accommodating. So it seems like there's room to move those curbs around as well. The bollards and would be something that we would think that would be put in with the contractor as part of a capital improvement piece. The street painting, Aurora just went over that, and there's a few different ways that that could be done. So that's sort of the breakdown of the items that were shown in sort of focusing on how to make this safer for pedestrians, to feel safe within the plaza and to have this comfort in the plaza that makes you want to hang out in the plaza, be in the plaza, go to the plaza. The things that we're talking about were, you know, improving the existing walls and then adding a couple of smaller walls. Seems like that's part of the framework I talked about earlier, part of what a contractor would build. We would have to replace the existing asphalt in the plaza and put new paving in to meet ADA and just for maintenance and things like that. And so that's located in here as well. On here we have the tables as part of that structure as well. But an interesting thought I had when Aurora was presenting was maybe that's something that's actually, depending on how the city feels, a community build piece done with an artist. And it's this big communal table and it becomes a place of gathering. I feel like it was something that when we met recently with the Church of the Good Shepherd, the idea of, you know, like them crossing the street and having events there after church. And it just seems like it would just have it be an invitation to say, hey, let's gather here. The bike racks are pretty affordable in relation to the scale of this whole piece, but it seems like that could come from the city of Oakland request a bike rack, or what Colin was referring to, I think a lot of funding that's come from the California Active Transportation Program. There's a lot of different places we can go with that. And then the trees, there's the nonprofit that's kind of related to Sierra Club, the Trees for Oakland. And they give out like 15-gallon saplings. And that could be something that can be done as a community planting day to sort of like take over parts of the plaza and make it feel like it belongs to the neighborhood again. And then the other pieces are, you know, for the community. And I feel like some of these things can be added over time, like that vertical divider, whatever that is, you know, is that done by a local artist? Is it money that's gotten from a public art grant, or is it something like community donations? When Walter Hood's office did the improvements at Lakeshore, they got donations, and it was like donations from the community, and they integrated that into part of the design. So there's multiple ways to fund different projects. And then with the planting, you're going to want a contractor to install the irrigation, but why not do a community build day where we put the plants in? I would love to go and do that. I would love to be a part of it. And then lighting would be part of the capital improvement plan. So that's sort of our rough breakdown. And for the next meeting, when we get the refine the design per the comments tonight, we would have this with a little bit more detail and then sort of very rough numbers so that we have an idea of cost. Now, costs have gone up about 20% in the last year, and they'll go up some more probably. So these numbers would be a sort of a rough number, but it would give us a sense of where we're headed in terms of the cost, so we could see what would be implementable for the park. I think the next slide is the breakout rooms, right? Or more of the images to end with before the breakout rooms.
Yeah, we kind of to go over, let's see the plan with and without trees.
And so all these triangles on here that we're showing, that's the idea of like painting the asphalt, which is still the street. It's happening in a lot of different places, Tennessee, Portland, other areas of Oakland. And our thought with that was that we're taking over identity of the street. We're demarcating and saying that this is a place where it's for pedestrians, not that people are hanging out on the street, but hey, when you're a car, you need to slow down. This is a place where people are. And so it has multiple functions and it doesn't cost that much, and it lasts for a very long time if you use the striping paint like they use in bike lanes, and there's many colors in that. And I believe that's it, right? Yeah. Okay. So Abby's gonna, if you want to stop sharing for a second, Aurora, Abby's gonna put us into breakout rooms, and Aurora and Will and I have a series of questions we're gonna ask because we want to really get people's feedback. And before the pandemic, I would bring cards, and I'd give you a red card, a green card, and a yellow card when you come in the room, and we'd ask you a question. And if you hold up the green card, that would tell me like, I'm okay with what you're asking. This is good. If you hold up the yellow card, like, I'm not so sure. I have some questions. And if you hold up the red card, okay, you have serious concerns about that idea. So since we're not all in the same room tonight, I'd like to do thumbs up is green. Thumbs sideways is I have some concerns, and thumbs down is red. It's kind of like old Roman times, right? And what that will allow us to do is we have about 20-25 minutes for the breakout, and we've got a series of really simple questions. But if there's a bunch of people that say, I don't want bulb outs, thumbs down, then it'll allow us to be like, well, what do you not like about them, and can understand that. So when we go to do the redesign, we'll have captured everybody's concerns, and we'll be able to integrate those into the final plan. So I think that's pretty straightforward. And if you don't have a camera, you could write it in the chat to your group, or you could use your reactions. And the heart could be a thumbs up. And what did we decide was the thumbs down, Aurora? I don't even remember. You could just use anything else for a thumbs down.
Do it.
Yeah. So with that, I think we could go into our breakout rooms, and then we'll come back, and one person from each group that's not Aurora, Willa, or I will summarize the group's discussion in just a couple of minutes so everybody can hear what the other groups were talking about at the end. All right. I'll see some people in my breakout room shortly.
I think I've got everybody in a breakout room. We'll see. Lisa, I might have put you. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh. All right. There we go. Oh, okay. 1 second. Hold on. Let me do this actually.